former CSIS person, and I think it was with Artie Pohl, and he was adamant that the report does not reflect the work that he had done and presented as a CSIS investigator.
So we bring you breaking news today, everybody. As many of you know, the Hogue Commission was set to drop their report today. They did. And I don't know what we expected, but I don't think we expected what we got. And joining us today, or joining me today rather, because Tanya is taking a sabbatical on this episode, is former Liberal MP and who is rapidly becoming a great friend of the channel, Bob Bratina. Bob, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's an important topic too.
100%. So what we're going to do before we dive into the meat of this is we're going to take a look at some of the statements that Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh have made prior to this, specifically about the alleged 11 parliamentarians that were compromised. And then we're going to take a look at what Justice Hogue had said today, and then Bob and I are going to rip this apart.
Okay.
So first of all, this is Jagmeet Singh last summer, once he reviewed the NCCOP report following getting his security clearance. Let's take a look.
I am more alarmed today than I was yesterday after having read the report. After having read the report, I am more convinced than ever of the conclusions of the NCCOP committee and the report that some parliamentarians are, in the words of the intelligence services, semi-witting or witting participants in the efforts of foreign states to interfere in our politics. That all of these behaviors of these MPs are deeply unethical and contrary to the oaths and affirmations parliamentarians take to conduct themselves in the best interest of Canada. In short, there are a number of MPs who have knowingly provided help to foreign governments, some to the detriment of Canada and Canadians.
Because I am Prime Minister and privy to all these informations, I have the names of a number of parliamentarians, former parliamentarians and/or candidates in the Conservative Party of Canada who are engaged or at high risk of, or for whom there is clear intelligence around foreign interference.
And in your salacious testimony earlier today, you mentioned that you're aware of the names of past and present Conservative parliamentarians, former parliamentarians, candidates that are in risk of being compromised by foreign interference. I'd like to ask you, are you aware of the names of any Liberal parliamentarians, former parliamentarians or candidates that are at risk of being compromised by FI?
Yes, and for other parties as well, because I have access to large amounts of information.
Okay, so Bob, I'm not sure what you got from that, but what I get from that is you have Jagmeet Singh and Trudeau. Trudeau has far more access than Jagmeet Singh does to this type of information. Sounds like there's no doubt. There's a list of parliamentarians, former or sitting, sounds like both, that are at risk, and some are wittingly collaborating with foreign countries. That's what I got. Is that what you got?
I don't know how you could avoid that conclusion.
Yeah. Okay. So we're starting with that premise, everybody. Now, everyone was looking forward to hearing Justice Hogue's conclusions, specifically on the list of the 11 parliamentarians. This is what she had to say.
States have been trying to interfere with each other since the dawn of time. What is new, however, are the means being deployed by these states, the extent to which the phenomenon seems to be taking hold, and the fact that it is being talked about publicly. That said, and it is one of my most important observations, our democratic institutions have remained robust in the face of attempted foreign interference. Although there are a very small number of situations where foreign interference may have had some impact on the outcome of a nomination contest or the result of an election in a given riding, foreign interference did not impact the outcome of the last 2 general elections. Although a few situations involving attempts to curry favor or develop problematic relationship with a parliamentarian have come to light, such phenomena remain marginal and so far appear to have been largely ineffective. Some may have benefited from the support of a foreign state, sometimes without knowing anything about it. But again, so far, this does not seem to have led to any real gains for the states involved. Nor have I seen any evidence to suggest that there are currently so-called traitors in Parliament. While I saw evidence of some concerning behavior, the evidence does not show any MPs plotting with foreign states against Canada's interest.
Okay. So, Bob, what's your take on that?
Well, I think it's important for your viewers to understand that the particular tensions right now, and there are many, there's Ukraine, there's Palestine, Gaza, we understand all of that, but historically, and while I was around, it was China and India. And we have, or had, I can't remember the number now, about 17 Sikh members of parliament in the Liberal caucus. And I want to say right up front, they're a really great group. They're nice people. I thought highly of them all. And but the issue, of course, was the Sikhs and some, not the members of parliament, but members of the Canadian community, hoping for an independent country to be created called Khalistan. And so there were people of Indian background who would typically, and I can quote basically the real story on at least one, they were very upset about the crossover of Canadian parliamentarians being involved in the design of a new country and elsewhere in the world.
We actually have one of them as an example right here. So this is Ramesh Sangha, who was dropped from caucus and accused of spreading baseless and dangerous claims. This is probably one of the ones you're thinking of. Yeah,
Ramesh, and a really interesting guy, and very close to the, of course, we choose our ambassadors, the Croatian ambassador, the Serbian ambassador in my case, and others. So that's not a foreign interference thing. That's normal parliamentary business. But certainly Ramesh was close and very supportive of issues that were coming forth from India. So he was so outspoken, they finally had to say, we've had enough, and he had to sit as an independent. And that was all about that. Now, there's another issue that came up that you may recall. There was agricultural workers in India who were for the most part, Sikhs in the Punjab, had an issue. Modi was changing some laws, and I don't want to get into it, and I can't even bring all the facts right now, but they were very concerned about changes that were being made to the way they farmed and did agriculture. And so even in Hamilton, there was a big convoy of trucks that drove through right past my office, and on they went. I forget where it all ended up. But I know that Modi was upset that Prime Minister Trudeau was weighing in on their behalf on an issue that was taking place in India. So that was another one. And then, of course, we have the issue of Chandra Arya. We're still not sure why he was prevented from carrying on as a candidate for the leader of the party.
Yeah, and we postulated our theory that is it possible that he is one of these 11 parliamentarians that NSICOP spoke of, because he's a backbench MP, yet he has access to Prime Minister Modi during this whole scenario where Justin Trudeau is standing up in the House of Commons and accusing India of essentially assassinating one of one of the people on Canadian soil.
That's right. And Chandra's really an interesting guy. I wouldn't say I'm close to him, but he was okay. We, had conversations. But unbeknownst to a lot of people, I think, because he's not a high-profile MP, the word was among the MPs that he had one of the richest riding funds in the thousands and thousands. Most of us are scraping by with a few $1,000s. Well, but that didn't seem to be a problem for Chandra.
Yeah.
And similarly, in collecting the $50,000 that would be required for candidacy, he probably had good contacts right across the country as well. So the reason I'm pointing this out is although quiet, he's kind of a powerful guy in his own way. When you can accumulate, that kind of support and financial support, that would be perhaps, if the rumor was true that he had something to do with that, that they would maybe ignore it or try to hope it would go away. Obviously hasn't gone away, but there's no evidence that I'm aware of that he is involved in that. But it's
very peculiar, right?
It is peculiar because of all of the billion people in India, how many have access directly to Modi?
Right, and we've talked about this. How many people have access from India to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau? Nobody. Nobody does. So, this isn't just, Mr. Arya flew over to India and just decided I'm going to go and knock on Mr. Modi's door and have a conversation. That just doesn't happen.
No.
And you reference his wealth. He was actually bragging, I believe, on his first interview that he still had over $100,000 in his coffers from his previous election. Like most candidates, they raise maybe 100 or 150, and that gets spent down to almost nothing at the end of the campaign. So he must have raised well over $250,000 if you go by that logic. So to have that amount of capital sitting there, he didn't have to raise any money for the first $50,000. He just had it right there.
There it is. So he's an interesting guy, very powerful guy, very devoted to his ancestry. I know that. I mean, we all are to a certain extent. And so that's, it would be important in Hoag's report to draw conclusions that would completely eliminate the possibility of those rumors even existing. But all she's really done is incited more discussion around those things.
Well, and here's what I react to. You have Jagmeet Singh seeing this report saying, I am so concerned about this. I'm more concerned than ever. There's evidence here. Justin Trudeau comes out, rightly or wrongly, and says there's evidence here. And then if you look at all the different takes on the Hoag report, one of them that I saw was in the Toronto Star. It was saying she's basically contradicting, not nudging them. She's completely contradicting these statements that there was any at all. And her rationale is that, maybe the NSICOP people misinterpreted some things. She said that one of the pieces of evidence that NSICOP was reviewing was a report from CSIS that not CSIS themselves, but a source that they got this from said that MPs were compromised. So she's basically saying, well, CSIS isn't saying they're compromised. CSIS' source is saying they're compromised, so therefore they're not compromised. And I don't know, it seems to me like the goalposts are being moved in a significant way in order to try and, make this go away. Now, here's the problem. Canadians don't get to see any of this.
No.
So because Canadians don't get to see any of this, Canadians are left wondering, who do I believe? Right? Because if you want to believe Hoag, then you have to not believe NSICOP, which is Trudeau's own committee. You have to not believe Jagmeet Singh, who read the NSICOP report, and then you have to not believe Trudeau. Now, that's relatively easy not to believe Trudeau, but if there was nothing there, why would he have been this concerned not to have the inquiry in the first place?
Exactly. And the other point, I mean, Karina Gould made a career out of hiding the documents, you know, and I don't want to go too much about Karina. We got along really well. She's a really nice person, but I think A, she's over her head a little bit, and B, she's very loyal. And so this notion of not allowing the access the unredacted documents isn't even, was it presented at all by Hogue? That should have been an issue that she would have spoken to.
Well, and admittedly, I haven't been able to go over the entire report yet, but one of the main conclusions that I see that Hogue drew was, well, the government is a poor communicator. Well, yeah, poor communicator, I bet. And for those that don't know, and what Bob's referring to is Justice Hogue and the commission had requested thousands and thousands of pages of documents, and it was stated in the mandate that they would have access to any document that they felt relevant to the inquiry. And then Dominic LeBlanc had come out and said, well, she doesn't get access to these documents because we don't feel that they're relevant. And this blew up in committee because all of the opposition parties were saying, well, wait a minute, you said that she could have any documents that she wanted that she felt relevant. You don't get to decide what she finds is relevant. So there's all these documents that are redacted that she had, and she doesn't even get to review. So how is this even a legitimate report? And that's the question.
And this brings the whole issue of how Trump got elected and how Pierre Poilievre is so strongly in the lead. The Democrats and the Liberals are the authors of their own misfortune. People are not believing, well, I don't care what Trump or Poilievre are about. You've disappointed me. I don't trust you. It's a very simple equation. And so for the Americans who are so adamantly against Trump, and I don't like the man. There's very little to like about the guy. But you blame yourself. You're the reason why he got to where he is. And the Liberals, I'm afraid they're doing the same thing.
Well, and that's just it, right? Here's the thing. Like, the Hogue Commission could be completely accurate. The problem is Canadians won't believe it.
Doesn't ring true.
and they won't believe it because the Liberals have sown such a reputation of lies and mistrust that anything that they do, anything they touch, unfortunately, Canadians won't believe it. And I think the only time they would believe it is if it actually self-incriminates them. That's the problem.
Well, look at the ethics breaches.
Yeah.
No, everything was fine. Yeah, well, it wasn't fine.
Yeah. And, I have nothing to apologize about. Well, I apologize that everybody felt that I breached the ethics charter.
Yeah, and is Carney an insider or an outsider?
Oh, yeah. It's just ridiculous.
Gee whiz.
Well, and one of the other conclusions that was drawn from the Hogue report, and this is what I find very insulting to our intelligence community, was CSIS should communicate better to the government. I'm sorry, but I don't see how that is a reasonable conclusion without really looking at what this government was doing, because you had multiple cases where Blair had admitted in committee that he doesn't read his email. You have Mendicino admitting he doesn't read his email. Like, nobody reads their email in the cabinet of the Liberal government.
Well, and Trudeau doesn't read email unless Katie says he does.
Absolutely. And only when she says he does, which he does only when it's convenient. But you also have people in Liberal offices holding back communication in some cases for weeks and weeks and weeks. And Hogue didn't find that, like, she'll say, well, I found some areas concerning. Well, you can't just leave it at that. You cannot leave the fact that somebody did not put forward classified reports to a minister that report into them and then just say, well, I don't find that's a problem. I'm pretty sure anyone with a brain would find that as being a problem. But either liberals are denying that they read things that they did, or they are denying reading things that they don't, meaning they're completely incompetent and or negligent. But you're putting the blame on CSIS for how they write these reports. And it's to the point, again, if there was nothing going on, why would you have multiple CSIS sources risking prison time putting out these leaks into the media? This makes no sense whatsoever.
No, but it follows the pattern, and I can tell you many times among the caucus members, the complaint was, this is a simple one, it's not foreign interference, but ministers show up to my riding, they don't even tell me, and they have a media conference, and we forgot to tell, so-and-so. In my case, I opened the paper one day, and it said, Minister Tassi is going to be announcing $400 million to Stelco. So I called Minister Tassi up. Hi, Phil. Did you want to tell me anything about this meeting that's being held with the $400 million? And I mean, everybody, not everybody, but there was so much of that. So you can see the pattern. And it goes all the way up to, best they don't know. Like this, we'll handle this. You be on your way. It's very condescending, but it stems from the arrogance of the original majority. They should never have gotten that majority. It would have been a better party without it. And frankly, it's collapsing on them.
Yeah. Well, and now they're, we put out a story earlier today about, he's trying to put, the last 10 senators in before he goes, which is just yes, he's legally allowed to do it, but what is he trying to look like the most, just, I'm not going to say, well, he is probably the most corrupt prime minister in history that we know of. And one of the most hated at this point. 77% of Canadians across this country want an election now. Over 2/3 of Canadians have found that Canada is going in the wrong direction, which means that Canada is ready for an election now. And now you have the Hogue Report basically putting the stamp on all of this, that there is more mistrust in Canada and the government of Canada than has ever occurred in our history. And I think the problem is what you're going to need is you're going to need a brand new public inquiry when the Conservatives take power for anyone to believe anything. And in which case we're going to have to go through all of this again and waste more taxpayer money. But maybe at that point, Canadians will actually feel they get the truth. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's funny because reflecting on foreign interference, I remember when the Americans hated Diefenbaker.
Yeah.
He didn't want to put nukes in the Bullmark missiles. Oh, yeah? We'll get rid of him. So they sent their A-team up to help Pearson win the election and defeat Diefenbaker. But they didn't hide it. Nobody did. But everything's hidden now because they're treating us like children. And we may be children, but we don't deserve to be treated that way because all that money they're spending comes from us.
Yeah, and it's just a perspective of we're the elites, you are the commoners, and we know what's best for you. So, where do you think this will go?
Well, I'm hoping that the prorogation will be defeated, and they'll go to an election. But then I can't really trust Singh to follow through on throwing the government out on the confidence vote.
Well,
because you can always say, well, it's not Trudeau anymore. Even though he said what he said, he also, Biden said he wasn't going to.
Well, that's where I don't put my trust in Singh. I put my trust in his caucus's self-survival because.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because otherwise, that was the whole motivation for the Liberals to get rid of Trudeau was their own survival, right? So, and rumor has it that right before Jagmeet did his complete 180 of all options are on the table to we're going to get rid of this government, there was an emergency caucus meeting and his caucus basically sat him down saying, okay, you're not calling the shots anymore because you may have your pension, but we want our seats still. Thank you very much. So, so even, whatever Singh may do or not do, that's where my hopes are, is on his caucus mates fighting for their own seats. But we'll see what happens. It's going to come at some point. It's either going to come on the 26th or sooner.
Well, I think Canadians are tired of the whole thing, and they want to move on, and that means an election. And nobody can be that stupid among the Liberal organizers to not realize that. They may continue to fight it and just keep going, but come on, it's over. It's finished.
Well, and do you want to lose your entire party? That's the question, right?
Yeah, because Mulroney went down. After Mulroney was, 2 seats?
It was bad. It was bad. Yeah. It was bad.
Yeah.
Bob and I were actually talking before we came over here, and he saw something interesting on CBC. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was a former CSIS person, and I think it was with Artie Poll, and he was adamant that the report does not reflect the work that he had done and presented as a CSIS investigator. And I won't go any more beyond that, because it's hard to remember the quotes, but he was really, my wife was sitting in the same room, and I said, have you heard this? This guy's really, saying how improper it seems the report was done. And I can't find it now.
Yeah, it's disappeared, which is interesting.
It was between 12:30 and 1. It was on CBC, and it was a French-Canadian accent and name, former CSIS guy.
But that's interesting. And we spent a good half hour trying to find it. And cannot find it anywhere. So I don't know if the higher-ups saw that and didn't like it, so they pulled it down. I don't know. But.
Well, because the interviewer allowed the interview to follow its course rather than the usual thing you see. Well, yeah, but on the other hand, like, how can you say that when this, but she didn't do that. So good for her.
Well, and that's the thing that we learned is let your guests speak.
Yeah, it's called journalism.
Yeah. So anyway, folks, it's been a fascinating day. It's been, I think, an infuriating day, and unfortunately, I think all you're going to hear is a lot of Canadians call cover up on this. And how can you blame them when you have the Prime Minister saying one thing, you have his committee that he created saying one thing, you have him initially saying when all of this was coming out in February of 2023 that, there's nothing to see here, there's no foreign interference. Yet his committee says, oh no, there's 11 parliamentarians that are potentially compromised. And now you have the Holt Commission reviewing everything that they allegedly had access to. And she's saying, nope, they just got it wrong.
This is the Naked Gun when the fireworks plant blew up. Nothing to see here. But something's going to come out of it.
Yeah. And I'd be interested to see what she has to say about Han Dong as well, because there was that whole scenario. He testified terribly in the hearing, and all I've read is that, well, yeah, there was some odd things going on, but there's no evidence that Han Dong knew about it, and there's no evidence that he was elected as a result of it, despite the fact that there was this mysterious bus with all these mysterious Chinese foreign students that showed up, voted, and no one seemed to give it another thought. And they all, allegedly, according to some of the reports from CSIS, had his name written on their hand in order to know who to vote for. So,
yeah, I knew Han, and hard to get too close to him, but which would surprise me. He's a very organized kind of a guy, but he really got emotional when all of this started unfolding.
He did.
Recall, yeah.
He did, yeah. He stood up in a House of Commons and was in tears as he was, quote unquote, leaving the caucus, which nobody believes that he left of his own volition. But he said he was launching a lawsuit against Global News for everything that they were putting out. We haven't heard a thing since. No. But anyway, folks, unfortunately, I think we have more questions today than answers from the Hogue Commission.
Well, that's what commissions are supposed to do, answer questions, not create new ones.
Right. And now I think the level of trust in this government has just decreased even more, if it could
Hard to
possibly.
believe. Yeah.
So, but we'll keep following us, ladies and gentlemen. And Bob, thanks for joining me on this and
Yeah.
giving us your take.
That's important for Canadians to get a sense of what's going on. And if I can help, I'm glad to.